One morning, everything felt the same. Streets looked familiar, shops opened as usual, and routines carried on without a second thought. Yet across Britain, certain everyday things were already slipping away, quietly and without farewell. One day they were simply part of life, and the next they were gone, replaced by nothing at all. No grand announcement, no countdown, just absence. Many of us didn't notice at first. We adjusted, shrugged, and carried on. Only years later did the realization arrive, sparked by a memory or a passing remark. You won't believe how many ordinary British habits vanished almost overnight. To understand why these disappearances mattered, you have to picture Britain just after the war, when life was stitched together by habit rather than headlines. Mornings began the same way for millions. Kettles warming, doors opening at predictable times, familiar faces passing each other without a word. School days followed set rhythms, lessons punctuated by bells and the walk home that never changed. Corner shops weren't conveniences, they were landmarks, places where names mattered more than receipts. Homes, too, carried routines. Chairs stayed where they always had, cupboards held the same items year after year, and streets looked much the same from one decade to the next. Nothing was rushed. Change arrived slowly, often so slowly you barely felt it happening at all. When something new appeared, it settled in gently, earning its place. That's why later rules felt so jarring. These weren't abstract decisions discussed somewhere far away. They reached into kitchens, classrooms, and pavements. Today, change seems to arrive overnight, announced loudly and everywhere at once. Back then, the shock came later when people realized that a familiar part of daily life had quietly slipped away forever. It was absence, not argument, that revealed how deeply those habits mattered. The little things are often the hardest to remember because they were never special at the time. They were simply there, woven into the background of everyday British life. Most people don't realize when this quietly ended because it didn't feel like an ending at all. It felt like an ordinary day. Think of the sounds first: the clatter of delivery carts along the street, the steady rhythm of footsteps heading to work, the familiar knock that arrived on the same morning each week. These noises marked time better than any clock. They told you where you were in the day and sometimes even the season. Then there was the packaging. Paper-wrapped goods folded by hand, labels you could recognize from across the shop, colors that never seemed to change. You didn't need instructions. You knew exactly how things worked because they always had. It was so normal, no one imagined it would ever stop. Weekly rituals anchored everything. Certain tasks happened on certain days, without discussion or debate. People planned around them, trusted them, depended on them. Today, convenience has replaced predictability, and silence has replaced many of those sounds. Looking back, it's startling how these small details defined daily life far more than we ever realized. And once they vanished, they took a piece of that shared rhythm with them, whether we noticed at the time or not. Those quiet losses now linger in memory, reminding us how ordinary moments once shaped a nation together without anyone noticing. The day the rules changed rarely felt dramatic at the time. There were no sirens, no speeches echoing through the streets. Instead, a notice appeared, a quiet instruction given, and life simply adjusted. This changed everyday British life more than people realize, precisely because it happened so calmly. People read the sign, nodded, and carried on. Habits that had been second nature were set aside with little fuss. Shops rearranged their shelves, homes adapted their routines, and streets took on a subtly different feel. Within weeks, what had once been everywhere began to feel oddly out of place, as though it belonged to another era altogether. What's striking now is how little resistance there was. Generations who had lived through rationing and rebuilding understood adaptation. You made do, learned new ways, and didn't dwell on what had been lost. Complaining wouldn't bring it back, and besides, tomorrow still needed getting on with. Today, change often arrives amid noise and argument. Back then, it arrived quietly, folded into daily life without asking permission. Only later did people realize that something familiar had gone for good. The adjustment happened so quickly that memory lagged behind reality. And that's why these moments feel astonishing in hindsight. They weren't dramatic turning points, but gentle shifts that reshaped routines forever, leaving us with the strange feeling that a whole chapter of everyday life ended without anyone really saying goodbye. It all slipped away quietly, leaving memories to surface years later in unexpected moments, alone now. What we lost was never just the thing itself. It was the pause it created, the shared moment that gathered people together without planning. Familiarity has a quiet power. It makes strangers feel less distant and routines feel reassuring. When certain habits disappeared, a small sense of belonging went with them, even if we couldn't name it at the time. But change is never a single story. Alongside loss came new awareness, new ways of looking after one another, and a different kind of simplicity shaped by caution rather than custom. Life didn't empty out. It rearranged itself. People found fresh routines, new meeting points, and other comforts to replace the old ones. Looking back, it's tempting to label the past as better and the present as worse, but that misses the truth. It wasn't better or worse, just different. What matters is remembering how deeply those everyday moments connected us. If you tried to explain these habits to younger generations today, it would sound almost unbelievable. Ordinary routines, once accepted without question, now feel unthinkable in a faster, more regulated world. Back then, life moved at the pace of people, not policies. Today, expectations shift quickly, and yesterday's normal can vanish overnight. It's worth pausing to wonder which parts of our own daily lives will quietly disappear next. Some things don't fade because we stopped loving them. They fade because the world moved on.